Imagine this. You walk into your favorite grocery store one weekend. The store increases the price of eggs by 50 cents. Do you pack your bags, move to another city, find a new job, pull your kids out of school, leave your friends and family, all because eggs cost 50 cents more? Of course not. You might complain, you might compare prices, but you stay, because starting your entire life over is way more expensive than the extra 50 cents. Now think about wealthy people. If we tax them, they'll leave. It sounds scary. It feels believable. And honestly, most of us repeat it without even thinking. Have you ever noticed how, whenever someone tries to raise taxes on the rich, the same warning comes up? But how actual or possible for people with children in private schools, businesses rooted in one location, million-dollar homes, deep professional networks, and social circles built over decades. Their entire life is tied to one place. And yet, we are told that if their tax bill goes up by a few percentage points, they will suddenly abandon everything and run away to another state or another country. When you compare it to real life, that argument begins to sound less like a truth and more like a scare tactic. And here's where it gets interesting. The wealthy do not need to leave. They do not need to move their body anywhere. Why? Because in the United States, the tax system is structured to allow them to move something much more valuable: their money. They can shift money, delay money, borrow against money, protect money, and sometimes make money disappear entirely from the tax system, all without ever packing a suitcase. And here's the surprising part. Some of those exact systems the rich use can actually be used by regular people too, if you understand how the rules work. So in today's video, we are going to break down the truth behind the famous line, "If we tax rich people, they'll leave." We will uncover why most wealthy Americans rarely move, how they really avoid paying taxes, and how everyday people can use some of these same strategies on a smaller scale to protect their own money. By the end, you are going to see the United States tax system in a completely different light, not as a wall blocking you, but as a map that shows you exactly where the openings are. Let's get into it. We hear the phrase so often that it starts to feel like a fact. If you tax rich people, they'll just move. But when you look at what actually happens in real life, the story is very different. Let's start with another simple everyday example. Think about your job. If your employer reduced your pay by 1% tomorrow, would you immediately quit, move to another state, start over from scratch, and hope things work out? Probably not. Because starting life over is expensive, stressful, and risky. A small change usually is not enough to make a normal person uproot their entire world. Now replace your job with a millionaire's life. When a state raises taxes on very high-income households by a few percentage points, that increase is usually a tiny fraction of the wealthy person's total net worth. It is an inconvenience, not a crisis. And just like you would not move over a 1% salary cut, most wealthy people do not move over a slightly higher tax bill. Here is the truth the media rarely explains. Most millionaires in the United States stay precisely where they are, even when taxes go up. Why? Because moving is expensive in ways that go far beyond money. Wealthy people usually have children in private schools, businesses with local employees, social and political connections built over decades, real estate portfolios tied to one city, and deep status in their community. Walking away from all of that to save a little more on taxes is like burning down your house to save on electricity. It makes no sense. And here is the part people never talk about, and this really matters. When rich people do move, it is rarely because of taxes alone. It is usually because they are retiring, moving closer to family, chasing better weather, or relocating for business opportunities. Taxes are usually reason number 4 or 5, not reason number 1. A great everyday example is Florida. People love to say, everyone moves to Florida because there is no state income tax. But if we are honest, how many people do you know who moved there for the tax code? And how many moved because they wanted sun, beaches, warm winters, and a lower cost of living? Exactly. Yes, a tiny number of ultra-high net worth individuals do move strictly for tax reasons. But that word tiny is the key. It is such a small group that it barely makes a dent in overall tax revenue. States that raise their top tax rates still collect more, not less. This brings us to the bigger question, the one most people never think to ask. If the rich are not leaving, Then how are they avoiding taxes? This is where the real story begins. Because wealthy people do not fight the tax system by running away from it, they fight it by outsmarting it. So now that we have broken down the myth, let's move into the truth. How the tax code is actually built, who it benefits, and why your paycheck gets taxed harder than a millionaire's wealth. Now that we have cleared up the idea that rich people pack their bags the moment taxes go up, let's talk about something even more important. How the tax system itself is built. Because here is the uncomfortable truth. In the United States, the tax code treats your paycheck and a millionaire's wealth like they belong to two completely different worlds. Let me show you what that means in real life. Think about your weekly job. You work 40 hours. Your employer pays you. And before you even see that money, the government takes a chunk from your paycheck. Federal taxes, state taxes in many states, and payroll taxes for Social Security and Medicare. You do not get to negotiate it. You do not get to delay it. You do not get to skip it. It just comes out. Your money is taxed before it ever touches your hands. Now, let us compare that to how wealthy Americans make most of their money. Millionaires and billionaires do not rely on paychecks like regular people do. The most potent part of their wealth comes from stocks, real estate, businesses they own, investment gains, and property that appreciates over time. Here is the twist. When those things grow in value, they are not taxed right away. Sometimes they are not taxed for years. And in many cases, they are never taxed at all. Let's make this painfully simple. If you work an extra shift at your job and earn an extra $100, you get taxed instantly. If a rich person's stock goes up by $100, they can avoid taxes for years or forever. This difference is the heart of how the wealthy keep more of their money without ever leaving the country. Imagine two people. Person 1 works a 9-to-5 and earns $50,000. Person 2 owns investments that have gone up by $50,000. Person 1 pays taxes immediately. Person 2 does not pay a single dollar until they decide to sell. And even when they finally pay, they are usually taxed at a lower rate than person 1. That is like two neighbors buying the same car, but one person paying full price while the other gets a discount just because they walked in through a different door. And here is where it gets even more interesting. The government offers official tax breaks, not secret loopholes, that benefit people who own retirement accounts, large stock portfolios, rental property, businesses, and high-value assets. These tax breaks are called exclusions, deductions, and preferences. But they all mean the same thing. If your money comes from wealth, you get treated gently. If your money comes from working, you get taxed hard. So now we understand the setup. The tax code makes it easier to grow wealth and more complicated to survive on wages. And once you understand that, the next question becomes almost obvious. If wealthy people do not rely on salaries and their investments are not taxed right away, then how exactly do they avoid taxes for so long? This takes us to the core of the entire video, the part most people never learn, the rich person's playbook, the strategies that let them grow, spend, and protect money, all while paying far less tax than the average working American. Now that we understand why the tax code treats wealth differently from work, it is finally time to talk about the part everyone wants to know. How do the wealthy actually avoid paying taxes? And how do they still live rich, buy mansions, fly private, and enjoy life without selling their assets? Let's start with the strategy. Billionaires use more than anything else. A smaller version of this strategy can work for regular people too. It is called buy, borrow, die. This is the #1 tax strategy for wealthy Americans. Every billionaire uses it. Many millionaires use it, and most people have never even heard of it. Step 1. Buy. Rich people buy things that grow in value, such as stocks, real estate, businesses, and private investments. When these assets grow in value, that growth is called unrealized gains. And unrealized gains are not taxed. If you work overtime, the government taxes your extra earnings today. If a rich person's stock grows $100,000, the government taxes nothing until they sell. Step 2. Borrow. Instead of selling their stocks or houses to get cash, wealthy people borrow against their assets. Imagine you own $1 million in shares of a big company. Instead of selling the stock and paying tax, you can borrow $300,000 using the stock as collateral. Loans are not taxable income, So a wealthy person can live on borrowed money, tax-free. Here is the everyday version for normal people. If you have a home and take a home equity loan or a line of credit, that borrowed money is not taxed either. Most people do not realize they have used a mini version of this same system. Step 3. Die. This is the step nobody talks about. When wealthy people pass away, their children do not inherit the assets at the original price. They inherit it at the new market value, thanks to a rule called step-up in basis. That means all the gains, sometimes millions, are wiped clean, never taxed. It is like pressing a reset button on decades of growth. This strategy works so well because it does 3 powerful things. It delays taxes for decades. It reduces taxes because investment gains are taxed at lower rates. And in many cases, it eliminates taxes when assets pass to heirs. Imagine being allowed to grow money for 30 years without ever paying a single dollar of tax on that growth. That is how dynasties are built in America. Now let's compare 2 neighbors. Neighbor 1 is Adam. Adam works a job. Every dollar he earns gets taxed today. If he works more, he pays more. Simple. Neighbor 2 is Daniel. Daniel owns a rental property. The property increases in value every year. He takes out a loan against the property to renovate it and even to pay some of his living expenses. Loans are not taxed. The increase in value is not taxed. And when he passes the home to his kids, that built-up gain disappears from the tax system forever. Both neighbors live on the same street, but one is playing checkers and the other is playing 3-dimensional chess. Another tax strategy commonly used by the rich is lower tax rates on wealth, also known as capital gains. Money earned from investing is usually taxed at a lower rate than money earned from working. If you earn money from your job, your tax rate can climb into the high 30s. But if you earn money from stocks you held for over 1 year, the top rate is much lower. Everyday example. If Sarah makes $100 mowing lawns, she loses a chunk to taxes. If Michael makes $100 because his stock went up, he pays nothing today, maybe a small amount years later, or possibly nothing ever. This tax preference quietly rewards people who already have money and punishes people who rely on wages. Now let's talk about real estate, the tax playground of the rich. Real estate has special rules that help wealthy investors. Depreciation deductions, which are paper losses that reduce taxes even when property rises in value. One-for-one swaps, called like-kind, or 1031 exchanges that let investors sell a property, buy another one, and delay taxes indefinitely, and business write-offs for improvements, travel, and operations. Here is the everyday scenario. Even a small landlord with a single rental property can use depreciation and deductions. You do not need a skyscraper. Even a small rental gets benefits that a normal employee never sees. The fourth way some millionaires pay less tax than their employees is through a tax break called carried interest. This primarily affects hedge funds, private equity firms, venture capital firms, and investment managers. They often get paid through carried interest, which is a special form of profit. Because it is classified as an investment gain, it is taxed at the lower capital gains rate rather than the higher wage rate. Everyday translation, it is like a manager earning a huge bonus but paying the same tax rate as someone cashing in long-term stock gains. It is a legal structure that saves them millions. Another strategy is moving money instead of moving their body. This is where the earlier myth falls apart. Rich people do not need to move to avoid taxes because they can shift their money into lower tax investments. Wealth can be borrowed against. Profits can be placed into trusts or tax-friendly structures. Corporations can move income to lower tax states or even other countries. They do not leave. Their money leaves on paper. Now that you understand the core tools wealthy Americans use, it is time to raise a bigger question. If these strategies work so well for the rich, can regular people use any of them too? Surprisingly, the answer is yes, just on a smaller scale. So, as you watch this further, I am going to uncover the everyday versions of these strategies that normal Americans can legally use to protect their money, keep more of their income, and grow long-term wealth the same way the wealthy do. At this point, you have seen how millionaires and billionaires avoid taxes without ever packing their bags or running to another country. But here is the part most people never expect. Some of these strategies, the legal ones, not the billionaire-only tricks, can also work for everyday Americans. No, you may not own a skyscraper. No, you may not borrow millions against a stock portfolio. But you can use smaller versions of the same tools that wealthy people rely on to keep more of what they earn. Let's break them down in simple English. Wealthy people avoid taxes by holding assets that grow without being taxed right away. Regular people can do something similar with a 401k, a 403b, a traditional IRA, and a Roth IRA. These accounts give you two huge advantages that mirror the strategies of the rich. Advantage 1. Tax, deferred, or tax-free growth. When your investments grow inside these accounts, you do not pay taxes year after year. You might pay later, or with a Roth, you might never pay tax on the growth at all. This is basically a mini version of buy and hold, grow tax-free. Advantage 2. Automatic compounding. If your money grows without the taxman touching it every year, your wealth compounds faster and stronger. For example, if James invests $50 per week in his Roth IRA, his growth over the next 20 or 30 years is tax-free. That means the government cannot touch the money he earns inside that account. It is one of the only actual hands-off-my-money zones most people ever get. Another powerful strategy for regular people is the Earned Income Tax Credit, often called the poor people's loophole. This is one of the most potent, underused tools for regular working Americans. The rich have buy, borrow, die. Working families have something else. Refundable tax credits. The Earned Income Tax Credit boosts income for low to moderate income earners, rewards people who work, and can result in refunds of thousands of dollars. Why does this matter? Because it is one of the few areas where the government legally, fairly, and by design pays you for earning a low income. For example, a single parent working a regular job could receive several $1,000s in tax refunds at tax time, even if their tax bill is zero. That is money that can go into savings, an emergency fund, or investments. Next is the Child Tax Credit, a built-in tax shield for families. Families with kids can qualify for the Child Tax Credit, the additional Child Tax Credit, and, in some states, their own version of these credits. These credits reduce your tax bill dollar for dollar, and some are refundable, meaning you can get money back even if you owe no taxes. This is one of the simplest ways regular people legally reduce taxes without doing anything sketchy. Another way for ordinary people to cut taxes is through health savings accounts, the mini version of the triple tax advantage. This is only available if you have a qualifying high-deductible health plan. Still, when you do, the HSA is the closest thing regular Americans have to the billionaire tax system. Money goes in tax-free, money grows tax-free, and money spent on health expenses is tax-free. This is a powerful tool because the tax savings are immediate. You can invest the funds, and you can keep the account even if you change jobs. For example, Emily puts $40 a week into an HSA. She invests it. 20 years later, she has thousands of dollars in medical costs she can pay for without paying a single tax dollar on the growth. It is a small-scale version of grow it now, never tax it later. Now let's move to real estate, the most accessible rich people strategy. You do not need a mansion to benefit from tax-friendly real estate laws. Here are two ways regular people use real estate like the wealthy. First, the homeowner exclusion. If you live in your home for 2 out of the last 5 years, you can sell it and exclude up to $250,000 of gain as a single person, or $500,000 as a married couple, from capital gains taxes. This is one of the most significant tax benefits available to ordinary Americans, and almost nobody talks about it. For example, a family buys a home for $200,000. Years later, they sell it for $450,000. Almost all that gain can be tax-free. Second, a small rental property. Tax breaks you do not get as an employee. Even one rental unit gives you access to depreciation, expense write-offs, interest deductions, and sometimes 1031 exchanges. You do not need to be a millionaire landlord. Even a small rental can reduce your yearly tax bill. For example, David owns a single rental unit behind his house. He collects rent and uses depreciation to reduce his taxable income. He pays less tax than he would if he made the same amount at a second job. Another strategy for regular people is low-cost index funds, the everyday grow without selling strategy. You may not have millions in stocks, but long-term index fund investing works on the same principle. You only get taxed when you sell. If you hold for many years, you pay at lower long-term capital gains rates. If you keep buying slowly and consistently, your money grows with minimal tax friction. It is slow, steady, and incredibly powerful. For example, Sarah invests $20 every week in a broad index fund. She has held it for years. She controls when she sells, which means she controls when she pays taxes. That is the regular person version of delay taxes. Choose your moment. Now that we have covered the fundamental strategies, the wealthy use, and the smaller versions regular people can apply, the next question is simple. If these systems work so well, why does the idea of taxing the rich makes them leave keep coming back? And what is really happening behind the scenes when states raise taxes on millionaires? To answer that, we need to talk about the politics, the fear tactics, and the real reasons these myths survive. At this point, you can clearly see the pattern. Wealthy people rarely leave when taxes go up. The tax code quietly favors wealth over wages. The wealthy use legal systems to avoid taxes without moving an inch. And regular people can actually use smaller versions of those same systems. So if all of this is true, why does the idea, if we tax the rich, they will leave, keep coming back? Why does it show up in every political argument, every news debate, and every election season? Imagine your boss pulls you aside and says, if we raise prices by 50 cents, every customer will stop coming. It sounds dramatic. It sounds urgent. It makes you feel like the world is about to end. But deep down, you know it is not realistic. Most people do not uproot their entire life over a tiny change. Same thing with taxes. The idea that rich people will suddenly flee the country if taxed slightly more is a fear story, not a fact story. Fear stories spread faster because they are emotional, simple, and make normal people feel powerless. But the truth is much quieter and way less dramatic. Here is the truth nobody likes to say. If we tax the rich, they will leave. Is one of the easiest political talking points ever invented. Why? Because it instantly shuts down debate, scares people, and protects wealthy donors. It is easier for a politician to say, we cannot increase taxes or we will lose all our millionaires, than to explain complicated tax structures or loopholes that actually need reform. It is the same energy as telling a kid, do not open that door, there is a monster inside. Even if the monster never existed, the fear keeps the kid in line. Let's be honest here. If you were wealthy and knew the tax code treats your money gently, that special rules help you avoid massive taxes. And that people believe you will flee if taxes go up, would you correct them? Of course not. This myth works perfectly for the very wealthy because it protects their assets, discourages tax reform, and makes regular people think nothing can be done. It is not that the rich are automatically evil. Some are good people, some are not. But the system rewards them for letting the myth live. A headline that says, millionaires are leaving our state, gets more clicks than, research shows 99% of millionaires did not move. Drama sells. Fear sells. Anything that sounds like a crisis becomes news. Meanwhile, long-term data, deep tax research, and quiet, boring facts rarely go viral. So the myth spreads on social media, becomes a talking point, and becomes so-called common sense, even though it is not grounded in reality. Wealthy people do not move because of schools, businesses, family ties, social networks, property holdings, familiarity, comfort, community, and stability. Leaving is not just about money. It is about identity. It is about starting life over. And most people, rich or poor, do not want to do that. They do not need to move their body because they already know how to move their money, quietly, legally, and strategically. So the real question is not just, do the rich leave when taxed? The bigger, more important question is, what does all of this mean for regular Americans trying to build wealth? The wealthy are not running away. They are not packing their bags or buying one-way tickets out of the country. They are doing something much more innovative, something far quieter. They are following the system's rules. They do not need to leave. They do not need to run. They need to understand how the tax code works and position their money where the rules benefit them most. And here is the part that matters for you. You do not need to be a millionaire to start using the smaller versions of the same strategies. You have seen how retirement accounts protect your growth, how tax credits like the Earned Income Tax Credit and the Child Tax Credit can boost your income, how health savings accounts let you grow money tax-free, how real estate has built-in tax advantages, how long-term investing reduces your tax bill, and how holding assets, not just working for wages, puts you on the wealth side of the tax code. This is the message nobody teaches in school. The tax system rewards people who own. It punishes people who only earn. When you finally understand that, your entire financial life shifts. You stop thinking like a worker and start thinking like a builder. You stop believing wealth is only for people with millions and start seeing that it is built one smart step at a time. You stop fearing the rich leaving, and you start learning the strategies that keep your own money from leaving your pocket. And now that you know the truth, the research, the psychology, the incentives, the strategies, you can finally make choices from a place of clarity, not fear. So, as you get paid, as you plan your future, as you try to build something better for yourself and your family, remember this: you do not have to be rich to use the rules. You have to understand them. And if this video opened your eyes, even a little, then imagine what happens when you keep learning. Drop a comment, like the video. Please share it with someone who needs this. And subscribe to Micro Money for more simple, everyday lessons that help you keep more of the money you work so hard for.